Now, when it comes to demographics, I see that the people that are like in their 20s are much more. They adapt to those things a lot faster. Where they're more willing to go and plug into a system and enter in what they ate every day, or they grew up around Facebook and MySpace, and MySpace isn't really that big anymore, but they're a lot of times they're on Facebook. Where I see a much bigger pool are the people that are the baby boomers. So the first of those turned 65 in 2011. Is there a lot of stuff being done to address that particular population, or is it? Because a lot of stuff I see is addressed to people that are much younger than age 65.
That's a very good question. I think one of the challenges we have in the industry is that a lot of the startups right now being done by very young people, which is what you typically see with young entrepreneurs. Yeah. But at time, their customers are not people like them. They are really more people above the age of 65 who have different behavior and acceptance of technologies. And so at time, it's really critical for the entrepreneurs that they spend a little bit more time really talking to the potential user and the potential payers, which are not necessarily the same, to really understand, what are the drivers, what are the objections, and what's the usability. Because most of health tech has to be dealing with the change of a behavior of somebody. Would it be a physician, a payer, a nurse, or patients, or family caregivers? And so really, the change of behavior has been the biggest challenge historically in healthcare. We never had to do that. We historically developed products for a physician with a super user, and then he took care of the usability aspect of it. So the big change that's happening with health tech is that it's really how do you get somebody to change behavior in such a way that you have an impact metrics that somebody's willing to pay for. Mm-hmm. And it's doing that dynamics there. So the good news is that the smartphones are an amazing platforms, and it is the adoption of the smartphones is faster than even the internet. And so you see a lot of the people over the age of 65 who have access to smartphone because they are user-friendly. Mm-hmm. But it is important that we don't confuse the platform with the applications. So it's very critical that when people develop an application, it is a total solution as opposed to a component. So one of the biggest challenge of the aging at home market, where people are developing a lot of sensors and technology for that market there, is that it's not a total solution. The total solution is probably a combination of high-tech, high-touch, which is we collect data we could not collect before, which is your activity level and the certain things you're not doing in the house. It goes into the cloud via the smartphone. It gets processed via some smart analytics. And then somebody has a dashboard and do something about it. And to do something about it could be a call center that basically call you back just to make sure you're okay. Or maybe you didn't take your meds right and your weight is going up. That's congestive heart failures. Or it could be you flag it for an emergency situation if something is critical. But at the end, there has to be this high-touch aspect of it, which has to be part of the whole solutions. Mm-hmm. And we see a lot of people just developing a component of it, which is usually capturing the data. You see other people who are just good at data analysis but don't understand how do you get what the data, because they're good into the data crunching. And I think the third aspect is that what do you do with that data to get somebody to change behavior? Yeah. And it's sustainable. And has an impact that somebody's willing to pay for. So it's really that whole metrics there. So the good news with the baby boomers is that most of us now are comfortable with smart technologies. Probably 85 may not be the case, but we're moving with the baby boomers being a big part of that population. But it is critical that the developers understanding what is the age segment and the level of comfort for those technologies based on their applications.
Yeah, you hit upon something that I've been talking about a lot lately as well, and that's that where you have these devices that gather tons of information, and I see these people up on their stage and telling about how great the technology is and how many data points they're grabbing in X amount of seconds and so much data, and everybody's all in awe about so much data that they're collecting, and I'm usually always the one that raises my hand and like, okay, who's going to be analyzing this data and how? And their answer up until just recently has been, well, the doctor is going to be looking at all this data. And you got to take into account for every 1 hour the doctor spends with a patient, he has about 2 hours of paperwork. And now you want to look at analytics as well and analyzing analytics. There has to be a better way. Is anybody really addressing that particular issue of how you're collecting it, what kind of data you're collecting, and then how to go about analyzing it? And then when you're analyzing it, what do you do with the analysis? Like, you could be gathering all kinds of data points and seeing that somebody might be susceptible to maybe a heart attack within the next week. Is anybody doing anything to address that right away so you can react on it?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what I was trying to explain is that unless you define what is the problem you're trying to solve, data by itself is just a whole bunch of data points. So what is really important is to have a solution that is solving an acute problem that somebody is willing to pay for, and therefore the data that you collect is allowing you to discover something you didn't have before. That's number one. Number two, that you can act upon it. Number three, that there's results that are measurable, which is usually a cost savings or an improvement of life, that somebody's willing to pay for. And that may be the same person for all of the above. Most of the time it's the different players. So what I think is missing is people who are developing this total solution approach. Will be developing their own technology or in partnership with other players. But I think you're going to see a combination of sensor technology, which is probably going to be commoditized over time, the data analytics, the big data, and really the key we're going to be successful are the people to say, well, what do I do with this? This is a call centers with a dashboard that has an escalation procedures and different people doing different things. It could be a way to do a telehealth directly to the patient and all of that. But to say is we're going to send all these data, so all the activities you do in your daytime to your doctor is not understanding the problem. So it all goes back to go back to define the problem. One of the reasons why I started HealthTech Capital and created an ecosystem, because it's very clear in this space you need three sets of expertise. Your first set of expertise is understanding healthcare. What are the workflow? Who are the stakeholders? Their motivation is changing. On top of that, you have the FDA where the rules are still a bit unclear. You have a lot of regulation you have to make sure you understand. The second part is to take technology and understand technology so you know how you can enable a new paradigm. It's not to put an application over mobile. It's using mobility to do something differently, and understanding how the technology allows you to do something differently. And the third aspect is user behavior modification. In the medical device industry, we never really dealt with the patient. Most of these applications in health tech have to do with a human interface. And really the understanding of getting that person to change behavior and then something happens is essential. And nobody has this three sets of expertise. Most of the startups have one or two. They don't have the three. So we create the ecosystem with the understanding that says we're going to bring in angel investors, industry and venture partners who have one or two of these expertise, but we as a group have the three of them. So when we look at a company there, we can quickly evaluate what's the weakness. And in several of the cases, we can basically be very proactive and go on the board, bring advisors and bring mentors to really help fulfill that hole. I will say very often the hole is the user engagement side. Very often the companies start by technologists. There's usually a little bit of weakness on understanding the medical aspect and where does it fit in the existing system, especially as the system is changing right now. So we find that most of these companies, they don't need just money. Right now, there's probably more money than they need. What they need is the smart money that can help them mentor and not just the revenue models. They will market risk companies. The technology doesn't have strong IP and it's not usually a breakthrough. It's the market concept, is a revenue model. That's the value of the company, and therefore validating that means you have to zig and you zag quite a bit. Therefore, you have to open the doors to the providers or the payers or the potential users so that they are trying it, and then you have honest feedback so you can adjust and modify. You never get it right on a piece of paper. The only way you get it right is that you get to work with somebody who's willing to give you feedback of
Right. Yeah, it's constant feedback.
It's constant feedback and adjust.
And you've got to ask the right questions.
Yeah. So a third of our members are physicians, so we have a lot of access to clinical expertise. But more importantly, we can open doors to try to help get these first potential users. Will be the hospital's provider or the physicians, depending what the value proposition is. And so I see too many people who develop this product in a lab or in the engineering rooms, and then they come saying, look at this perfect object. And I said, well, have you talked to A, B, and C, who are your potential users? And they will tell you this is a fatal flaw because of the following reason. That may be irrational, but that's the way we behave in healthcare right now. and you need to understand that. So the whole idea of the ecosystem is that we also bring in strategic. So as part of our members, we have, Johnson & Johnson, GE, Philips, Genentech, Adidas, and the reason is that we see strategics coming in earlier than we've ever seen, and they are following some of our lead terms on the Series A and investing with us. We just announced an investment by Samsung in one of our portfolio company there, and I think what's happening right now is that there is a very different way of funding this company and getting them off the ground and scaling them up, and is to bring some of this strategic much earlier. And so there's a massive change in the space right now because we see players we never saw before in healthcare. You have Qualcomm is extremely active. You have Voice Wireless is a brand new player coming in there. Social Capital Plus partnerships.
Well, I think also one of the big reasons why you're seeing that is the huge influx of potential money that's coming from the health tech sector.
Yeah, you have a lot of, let's be honest, life science investment in medtech and biotech is struggling right now for a long list of reasons, the long FDA approval being one of them. So you have some money being rerouted to the health tech space because it's much more capital efficient, and right now there's a lot of activities. And then you have a lot of the technology VCs who are saying 17% of GDP that's being modified. That's a huge chunk of the economy, and most of them are using their technology, which is mobility and telecom. So there's a lot of that influx there. Most of that influx is more direct to the consumer because that's a market they're probably more comfortable than trying to sell to the hospitals there. And then we have an influx of accelerators and young people coming out of college who basically have a passion to fix healthcare. And so we have a lot of young companies coming down the pipeline there. There's a bit of a funding gap, so I highly recommend people to say don't just go for the money, go for the money that's going to help you get to the next stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also my feeling is also if you're creating something that really helps people, the money will flow a lot easier and a lot faster because if you're actually helping people solve a problem.
Yeah,
and that's the big thing. I see a lot of stuff coming through the pipe, and I'm like, what problem are you trying to solve?
No,
they can't answer it. They're like, well, it's just cool.
No, you absolutely hit it on the nail because the biggest problem we see is that people haven't spent enough time understanding the problem they're fixing. And remember, it's fixing the problem for today under the fee-for-services, but also fixing for the problem where we're going in 3 to 5 years, which is going to be this capitated, risk-sharing payment system there. So you have to make sure that your value proposition can make money to whoever the payer is in this moving payment system there. And will it be the consumer? Will it be an employer? Or will it be the hospitals? We have some interesting situation there where startups pitch to us and I say, who's going to be the payer? And they say, well, we have one model is going to be the hospitals, another model is going to be the payer, the third model is going to be the employer, and the fourth model is going to be the consumer. That's the chaos that there is right now, which I think creates opportunity, but it also tells me that they haven't spent enough time with the potential constituents and really understanding what their needs are today. Mm-hmm. So again, I go back on the conference. That's why we have all this key opinion leaders in all these different stakeholders talking to say, this is where we are today, this is where we're going, this is our needs, this is the challenges we have, help us. And having those discussions there, because then it really helps entrepreneurs to identify, okay, where do I fit in the schemes of their needs? And also having the opportunity to talk to them live.
Yeah, when you have like 4 or 5 different possibilities of people that are going to pay for the service, how you talk to one is going to be completely different than how you talk to the other, and what they're looking for is completely different.
Well, your value proposition will have to be different.
Yeah, your value proposition changes all over the place. Yeah. You don't have one specific value proposition, and the way you have to communicate with them is all different. What they're looking for, what the stakeholder is looking for, is completely different. So you're just going to wind up confusing everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happening right now is because the industry is in flux. There's a bit of a tendency to say, hey, listen, I'm going to build these cool products and we'll figure out the revenue models later. And ironically, you have to do the reverse. You have to really define the pain point, figure out what would be a nice value proposition, then you build your product. Mm-hmm. And so right now we have a little bit of technology chasing for solutions that needs to be solved instead of the other way around, which is defining a problem, defining a solution, and building it. Mm-hmm. But the valley is full of those.
Yeah.
That's our strengths and weaknesses of the valley. Some of the massive disruptions, people think outside the box. And at the time, it's a big home run. but you have to really make sure at some time that you adjust to the customer needs.
Mm-hmm.